Man, what is happening, my YouTube family? Of course, it is your boy B New. I'm coming at you on this happy hump day Wednesday. So first and foremost, as always, positive vibrations out to everybody I got on the ice cube. So you know today is gonna be a good day. You understand what I'm saying? So I know yesterday, I talked about my list of the top 30 of all time, and we went from 30 down through 25. So today we want to go 25 down through 20, and continue from where we left off yesterday. Now there are some news and notes around the NBA that I did notice that we can talk about probably later on this evening or maybe tomorrow before we continue this list on. But for right now, let's just focus on the list. So I know on yesterday we talked about some great players. We talked about Ray Allen. We mentioned Paul Pierce, of course. We also talked about a current player in Giannis Antetokounmpo. So I want to go ahead and segue right into another current player who I feel has cracked the top 30, and he comes in on the list at number 24, and that player is the great James Harden. Hold on, before everybody start getting all in their feelings and crying or whatever, saying that Giannis Antetokounmpo should be ahead of Harden. There's a simple reason why I have James Harden ahead of Giannis right now. I ultimately think that Giannis could surpass him on this list, and I think both of them have a full potential to move up even further on the list when it's all said and done. But as of right now, this is where I have to rank them because their career is still playing out, and what my opinion is based on who they are as players, what they bring to the team, what have they accomplished, who would you rather have on your team, all these kind of things that play out into this. And of course, as accomplishments, what they have done and things of that nature. And I know Giannis has a ring, but as I continue to say, that is a team accomplishment, even though he contributed greatly to it. And you have to attribute some of the greatness of being the GOAT and being one of the greatest players ever to winning championships. Yes, I understand it does equate, but at the end of the day, it's not the only thing that's in the formula. It's all the things that I mentioned right before that. So with all that being said, let's talk about the bearded one in James Harden. So James Harden, although he hasn't won a championship, I have him over Giannis right now because you have to think James Harden is a 3-time scoring champion. He's a 3-time scoring champion whose career average is 25 a game. He gives you 25 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds a game. So if he can get you that, and you have to think about it, for the past 8 years, he averaged 30 points a game with the Houston Rockets. So that's an average of 30 a game. See, what dramatically took his average down, if you think about it, is his first 3 years with OKC, where he only scored 13 points a game. Now, when he was only scoring 13 points a game, he still was a 6th man of the year. He still contributed greatly to their success, and they were never the same after he left. They never actually went back to the finals after he left. And he went on to Houston to be a primary scorer, and you saw what he was able to do. And you also see anywhere that James Harden has ever gone, he's turned them into instant contenders. And if he had just a little bit of help, then they were going to pretty much go deep into the playoffs. And even though he's never made the finals, you have to think he made the finals with OKC, but lost to the great LeBron James. But you have to understand that the reason why I put him in front of Giannis is, and I don't have a smooth brain, so I take other things called mitigating factors into things. So, Giannis does have a championship and a finals MVP, but at the same time, I just feel like had James Harden, the very player we're talking about, hadn't been hurt and he was available for his team and 100% healthy and not hobbling around, not capable of doing James Harden things like finishing at the rim, drawing fouls instead of just becoming a decoy and somebody that sat out there and shot threes, then I think that both him and KD would have some more hardware on their finger. But at the end of the day, it was just not meant to be. And I'm not taking anything from Giannis, for that, because Giannis could ultimately end up in the top 10, in the top 5, and so could James Harden. But as of right now, this is where I have them ranked. But you got to think, James Harden, he is about to pass in points already. He is nipping right at the heels of Elgin Baylor, nipping at the heels of Clyde Drexler. Probably be passing Clyde Drexler, Elgin Baylor, and Robert Parrish within this year in points, even Charles Barkley. So with that being said, this is why I have James Harden ranked so high. He was an MVP in 2018, although a lot of people think, LeBron James was robbed that year. That was the year he played his 82-game season. But at the end of the day, he's been a 9-time All-Star, 3-time scoring champ, 7-time All-NBA, 6-time first team. 6-time first team. 6-time first team. That's saying a lot. That's saying a lot. Shit, I might need to move him up. I might need to move him up one to the person that I'm about to say. I might need to. After saying all that, hey, that was pretty damn impressive. James Harden. And if James Harden can go on to win, some championships with the Brooklyn Nets, he would definitely solidify himself as one of the greatest of all time, especially if Kyrie doesn't play any home games and some crazy stuff start going on and it's just him and KD as a dynamic duo versus a super team. So anyway, moving right along, number 23. I know a lot of you youngsters probably never seen him play, but I've watched most of his entire career, and let me tell you something, he was great. He was a beast on the floor, and although the game has changed, but he was definitely one of the greatest big men in the 90s, which everybody say was the most rough and tough time, a physical play, so they say. But at the end of the day, it was the Admiral, David Robinson, who I have coming in at number 23. Now, David Robinson, while only, you might look at him and say for his career, he only got you 21 points a game, but you got to realize he had very bad back issues starting around 97, 98. And luckily, if you think about it, when he hurt his back and went out, I think in 96, 97, when he hurt his back and went out, they only won like 15 games. And that's how they end up getting Timmy Duncan. So if David Robinson hadn't went out, then they wouldn't have never acquired Timmy D. You understand what I'm saying? So by them acquiring Timmy Duncan, that ultimately was the help that he needed to ultimately win the 2 championships that he won. Because like I said, team championships is a team sport. You understand what I'm saying? And David Robinson, even though he had a Mario Edley, he had a Sean Elliott, he had, he just never had great star power team around him until he got Tim Duncan. And that's when things started to change. But you got to realize David Robinson, the reason why I have him so high is also because of impact. The San Antonio Spurs were in the depths and the dark of the dungeon. And to be honest, when I was little and I used to watch this, I didn't even know San Antonio had a team at first until it was for David Robinson. And their team was in such a disarray. The franchise, they probably was close to selling the team. And, he had at the time the greatest turnaround ever, which I think the Boston Celtics ended up breaking that record when they got KD and Ray Allen. But at the time, back in, I want to say 91 or whatever, I think maybe 89, 90, when David Robinson came, they went from a record of 21-61 to 56-26. So that was one of the greatest turnarounds of all time in NBA history. And that is attributed to David Robinson. So while he only gave you 21 points a game, he did give you 11 rebounds. And he did give you a ton of blocks. And he was going to be one of the best defenders on the floor because it was a big man's league at that time. And he was one of the best big men because he gave Shaq fits. He gave Hakeem fits. David Robinson, if you go back and watch him play, it wasn't just he was just a big man. It was the skill that he had on his feet. And when Shaq was still young and learning how to play, it was David Robinson who really motivated Shaq to actually learn more footwork and how to actually develop a better touch down in the paint and also open his eyes and look to other people. Because David Robinson, I want to say, gave you 3.5 assists a game too, which is not bad for a big man. But of course, we talk about the offensive prowess. And I know James Harden, I do have him ahead of James Harden because if you notice, I said all NBA first teams for Harden, but yet I did not mention any all defensive teams for James Harden. So as we know, basketball is not football. You play both ends of the floor. And by him playing both ends of the floor, James Harden's not doing that. David Robinson, however, gave you 8 all defensive selections, 4 first team all D. So that kind of let you know what he was doing when he was going against some of the best centers of all time, because we all know the 90s did have some of the best centers of all time. Of course, the late 60s and early 70s as well, when you talk about the great Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain, who we probably will mention later on. But David Robinson also won the Defensive Player of the Year. So you have to think he won Defensive Player of the Year, and then the next year turned around and won Scoring Champion. So think about that. He won Scoring Champion. And it's crazy the way he won Scoring Champion, because it came down to the last game of the season. Shaq was actually, he needed like 65 points. He had to go out and score 65 points in order to pass Shaq and be the Scoring Champion. The man went out there and hung 71. You understand what I'm saying? He went out there and scored 71 and secured the bag. So please believe, if he wanted to focus on just scoring, then he would have a higher scoring average. But the man focused a lot on defense. He focused a lot on defense. So go back and watch some film of David Robinson if you never had the pleasure of doing so. Now moving right along, because I don't want to take up too much of our time. But we have to talk about number 22. Dwayne Wade. Now we all know Wade County D. Wade was a great player. And for now, I do have him ahead of James Harden. I know a lot of people debate who is better, and at the end of the day, James Harden may go down as better than Dwayne Wade in some people's opinion. But let's just say this: while Dwayne Wade didn't put up the points that James Harden has, James Harden, with the revolution of the 3-point shot, if that was going on during D. Wade's early career, then I honestly think that D. Wade would be a lot higher on the scoring list than number 30. Number 30, I believe, is what he is on the list. But at the end of the day, I feel like D. Wade, is better than Harden, because he was able to lead Miami to a championship when he had Shaq, who wasn't quite prime Shaq, although Shaq was still great during that time. He definitely wasn't the Shaq that was with LeBron. We all know that. Shaq still had some left in the tank. And, of course, Alonzo Mourning was coming off that bench. And although he was a lot older and long in the tooth, he still had a lot left in the tank as well. So, just with all that being said, I just feel like D. Wade is ahead of Harden. Not only because, and I know championships is a team sport, but by him being able to take an Eastern Conference, which Eastern Conference has always been the weaker of the conferences in most of the years if you look out throughout the history of the NBA. But to take the Miami Heat out of the East and go against the Dallas Mavericks, who we all know was a great team, and we all know what they did later on when he faced D. Wade again in the revenge game when they had LeBron. But at the end of the day, he was able to lead a franchise, and they were down 20, I want to say, in that fourth quarter, and would have been going down 3-1 before Dwayne Wade set fire and dropped all those points in the fourth quarter, and they went on to win that championship. Now, although Dwayne Wade has never had an MVP, James Harden has, and that's why some people say James Harden should be ahead of D. Wade. But we ultimately know whenever D. Wade had any bit of help, then he was going to go on and win championships. But it's not like he just had any help. We know he did have LeBron James. And if you get LeBron James, I don't give a damn. You're going to have a chance to compete. If you send a prime LeBron James to any team at any time, I'm telling you what, you knew what was going to happen. And when you have a player as great as Dwayne Wade, they were fortunate enough to win 2 championships out of 4, and they went to 4 straight. And we all know when LeBron went back to Cleveland, they went to another 4 straight. So we know what time it is. But at the end of the day, Dwayne Wade, just the way he orchestrated things, especially when he played with LeBron, the way he sacrificed his game, when they realized after they lost to Dallas what he needed to do to take a step back to LeBron and actually play together successfully. But at the end of the day, his knees just couldn't hold up, and we all know how deteriorated he was in those last 2 years in Miami and ultimately in Cleveland and Chicago. So sad to see him go out like that, but at the end of the day, he was one of the greatest to ever do it, and that's why I have him ranked so high. And you have to think about it. Dwayne Wade gave you 22 points a game, 5 assists, and 5 rebounds. But he also gave it to you on the defensive end of the floor too, and he averaged a career for his career 1.5 steals a game. So if you round it up, then you're talking about 2 steals a game for Dwayne Wade, who is a 3-time champion and a Finals MVP. So you have to give some credence to that. A 13-time All-Star, 8-time All-NBA. So if you 8-time All-NBA and 2-time first team, and then you got to think about it, he 3-time All-Defense. So 3-time All-Defense, second team to James Harden, 0. So we all know Dwayne Wade was playing both ends of the basket, both ends of the floor, unlike that of James Harden. And for now, that's why I had D-Wade ahead of him. Now, if D-Wade was to, if James Harden finishes, let's say, top 10 all-time scoring and adds a couple of rings to his resume, a couple of Finals MVPs, or, starts to play defense and steps it, which he has been playing better defense as of late, but if he can take on a more role of that, but I kind of see him with Brooklyn, he might average a triple-double if everybody stays healthy. So he can start doing some things that the Big O did and Russell Westbrook did. So it's just, I don't know. But at the end of the day, I got to have D-Wade ahead of him right now. It is what it is. And then, what I'm going to have to do, y'all, I was making this list, right? And then I realized, I got to the end of the list and I thought, you know what? I can't keep redoing this list. There's some people I left out. So I didn't want to say it's still a top 30 list, but I do have a couple of ties in here. So it's going to be a treat for y'all. And today, we might not make it all the way down to 20 because we're going to have to talk about 21. And you might say 21 and 20, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is a tie, right? This is a tie. And I won't say a tie because one of them may just edge out the other, and I'll let y'all be the judge. Put it in the comments and tell me who do you think is better between the two that I have tied at 21. And those two people are Sir Charles Barkley and the human highlight reel, Dominique Wilkins. So when you talk about Charles Barkley, you talk about the round mound of rebound. And a lot of people think he was just a player that lived in the paint. But Charles Barkley actually could stretch the floor. He was able to have a mid-range game. He was able to actually knock down some three-pointers when three-pointers weren't even just one of the biggest threats and things to do in the league at the time. So with that being said, go back, please, watch some highlight reels of Charles Barkley and the way he used to run the floor with Philly, the way he could even handle the ball, the way he could finish at the rim. I think he is definitely, in the top 5 power forwards of all time. Is great Charles Barkley. Now Charles, I think, only ranks, I want to say, in the top maybe 30 in points. So he's not, in the top 10 in points or anything like that, like Karl Malone or anything like that. But at the end of the day, Charles Barkley knew how to score the basketball. He knew how to play great defense. And although he never won the championship, that is the one knock against him. His teams were never as good as that great team, the 90s, as we all know, of the Chicago Bulls. Because when Michael Jordan was playing alongside the likes of Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman and Tony Kukoc and Steve Kerr, the team was just too good for Charles to win. But we all know Charles did win an MVP while Michael Jordan was in the league. And a lot of people say that Michael Jordan should have won that MVP. And I even say he probably should have won it because their numbers were too similar. But Charles led the team to 60 wins. They went to the finals. And you got to realize they took that Bulls team. And this was prior to Dennis Rodman. So let me make that clear. That's when it was just Jordan and Pippen before the arrival of Dennis Rodman. That's when they still had Paxson, I believe, even before Steve Kerr. But they did have Horace Grant, who was a great power forward at the time as well. So at the end of the day, they did win 3 championships with that team. And it was, not that my memory serves me correctly, it was Paxson who hit that game-winning finals clinching shot in Game 6, who hit the 3 to win the game. Because if it would have been a 2, it would have went to overtime. Or had he missed, then we would have been looking at a Game 7 in Phoenix. And for the first time, we would have saw Michael Jordan play in a Game 7 in the finals. Even though he did play in a Game 7, in the Eastern Conference Finals against Reggie Miller. But we'll talk about that at another time, too. Even though we did discuss Reggie Miller on yesterday. But I digress. So with all that being said, Charles Barkley, he was an MVP. He averaged 22 points and 11 rebounds, 4 assists a game, which is great. He was 11-time All-Star. He was 11-time All-NBA. When you talk about All-NBA, to me, that's one of the greatest accomplishments, because All-NBA means at your position, you were voted amongst your, peers, your colleagues, as far as coaches, as is a selection, not only by media, but voted by your peers too. That selection, that being the best at your position. And when you talk about All-NBA, 11 times and 5 times first team, that's a hell of an accomplishment. Because even when you talk about D Wade, he was what, 8 times, but sometimes second and third. But you're talking about 5 times first, and then of course the MVP that Charles Barkley had. So anytime you won the MVP of the league, regardless if it was voter fatigue of Michael Jordan, anytime you done that, then you've actually done something. That's winning the MVP. So there's something to be said for that, and that's why I have Charles Barkley at number 21. And I tell you what, even in today's era, Charles Barkley could play in today's era, because he could run, he could gun, he could shoot from the outside, and I'm pretty sure his outside shot would have been even better, because he would have spent more time on that in the gym. And he could bang with the big boys down inside, even though he was never as nearly as big as the big boys. Do you understand me? He was never as big as the big boys who he banged against, but he always held his own, and you couldn't hold him. You couldn't hold Charles, is what I'm trying to tell you. And the Chuckster, he was a hooper, and I watched him play his whole career, and I'm telling you, he was definitely a hoopster. And that Phoenix Suns team was a pretty good team too. When you think about, Kevin Johnson and Dan Marley and others that was on that team. But at the end of the day, even once he got to Houston, he just couldn't get it done. You have to realize he just couldn't do anything with Karl Malone and that pick and roll. It was just too much for them to defend. But anyway, let me focus on the human highlight reel, Dominique Wilkins, who I have tied at 21 with the great Sir Charles Barkley. So a lot of you youngsters probably don't know much about Dominique Wilkins. But one thing I want to let you all know about Dominique Wilkins is Dominique, they called him a human highlight reel for a reason. He's a 2-time dunking champion, even beat Jordan in the dunk contest. So that ought to let y'all know something about how great of a dunker he was. But not only was he a dunker, he was a great scorer. He was a great scorer. And I think we had Dominique Wilkins sitting at all time. He is definitely in the top 15. I want to say he's number 13 or 14 in scoring of all time. But you got to realize he scored 25 points a game for his career. 25 a game for his career. Gave you 25, 7, and 3. Now, if you notice, the 3 assists wasn't a lot because Dominique liked to score. But what y'all have to realize, Dominique was not a point guard, so it wasn't his job to assist the ball, especially back then. He was a small forward. He played in the 3 position, and his job was to run that wing and play, and he did it with the greats of them, because him and Larry Bird, man, I tell you what, him and Larry Bird went at it. Do you understand me? Him and Larry Bird, I remember in the 1988 semi-conference finals, man, y'all got to realize that was probably, to me, the greatest series of all time, the Eastern Conference semis. So this ought to let you know something. When Michael Jordan was getting swept by these Boston Celtics, Dominique was taking them to the brinks of elimination. And Dominique did have a little bit better team because he had a Doc Rivers, he had a Tree Rollins, if I'm not mistaken, Antoine Carr, who was decent at the time, but it wasn't a great team when you're talking about going up against Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, Dennis Johnson, Danny Ainge, Larry Bird. You understand what I'm telling you? Super team, right? And he was taking them to the brinks of elimination. And to me, that is more of an accomplishment than Charles Barkley and his Phoenix Suns going 6 games with Jordan in 1 finals appearance. You understand what I'm saying? Because had it not been for that super team, the Celtics, man, the 80s to me was a lot better than the 90s. That's what I'm trying to tell you all. That was one of the reasons for the Bulls' dominance. And we'll talk about that later as I proceed through these countdowns. But at the end of the day, Dominique was going against those great Pistons teams in the playoffs and those great Boston Celtics teams. You couldn't possibly ask those Atlanta teams to beat that. But he changed that whole Atlanta franchise around. He changed that whole Atlanta franchise around. But the thing about this, when I talk about that in a second, but I want to focus on that series between the Celtics and '88, because Game 6, they almost put the Celtics out. The Celtics tied it in Game 6, 3-3, 118-116 with the last shot by the heroic Larry the Legend Bird. Do you understand what I'm saying? And then it went to Game 7. And then you talking about Dominique and Larry Bird. Man, they traded shot for shot. Dominique couldn't miss. Dominique couldn't miss. I want to say he scored 51. Larry Bird scored about 37 or 38. Dominique dropped 51. But they lost, I want to say it was like 112 to 110. Lost by 2 points. Game 6, they lost by 2 points to the Celtics to get it tied 3-3. And then Game 7, you lose another heartbreaker to Larry Bird hitting the last shot. And Dominique even said whoever had the ball last was going to win, because they was going shot for shot. And I want to say Larry Bird scored 20 points in that fourth. Man, he couldn't miss. He couldn't miss. Please find that game and watch it if you can. Please find that game, because that was a war story. You understand what I'm telling you? That was a war story. And back then in the Boston Garden, rumor is they had turned the AC off and make it real hot for the opposing team. And the Celtics was used to playing in that. I'm telling you, that was something that they did back then. But man, had they beat the Celtics that year, trust me, they would have gave the Lakers all they could handle back then. But back then, Atlanta was a lot different than Atlanta is now. It was an up-and-coming city. The economy was growing, but it wasn't the Atlanta that it is today. And we know how, I won't say NBA do small market teams, but anyway. So, Dominique Wilkins, but his other accolades is 9-time All-Star, 7-time All-NBA, 2-time dunk champion, and something that's very interesting is, and I'm running out of time here, something that's very interesting I did want to mention, this small caveat, is although Dominique never won the championship and he was in the East going up against those teams, let's just remember in 1984 or 83, what year it was that he was drafted, Dominique refused to go to the team he was drafted to, because I don't know if a lot of you all know this, but Dominique was drafted to the Utah Jazz. Dominique was drafted to the Utah Jazz, but he refused to move out to Utah, and who could blame him? It's the 80s. But I don't know. At the end of the day, he refused to go to the Utah Jazz, and as a result, they traded Utah Jazz, because he was going to sit out, traded him for 2 players from Atlanta, and those 2 players were washed. They barely played even 2 or 3 years. They barely played 2 or 3 years with Utah. So of course we all know who got the better. We all know who got the better of that trade right there. But if Dominique, but the irony in this is what the irony in this is. If Dominique had went to Utah, man, just think about it. That team that Utah was able to assemble, and he could have played with the likes of a John Stockton. Man, you better stop playing. You better stop playing. Malone may have found his way there, and who knows? But at the end of the day, man, that would have been a deadly combo. But who knows? But just at the end of the day, it wasn't meant to be for the human highlight reel to win a championship in the NBA. But I just had to put him in there with him and Charles Barkley, who have a lot in common, being great dominant players in their era, but never had an opportunity to win a ring because they was going against such other great super teams that were assembled at that time that nobody could stop. But anyway, that's my list for today, y'all. I'm gonna hit y'all back tomorrow with some more of the countdown, and I also want to touch on some other news and notes. But I appreciate y'all, for everybody who stuck with me for the entire length of the show. Man, I definitely appreciate you all. Please continue to like, support, and share. We got to get this thing going. I'm about to drop the theme song on y'all. The theme song for every morning for the show. But anyway, as always, man, it's been your boy B New. I'm screaming right on to the real, and much love to these haters, man. I'm out.